Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Right, let our journey begin. So this next lot of information I want to cover off is what I go into at the start of all my workshops and everything. So I think this is going to greatly benefit you in understanding your awareness and your life and the way in which you create reality and enter into the experiences that you do, and come to the truths that you come through those, So a bit of background with me, okay? Now how I came into all of this, all the psychic stuff and that, like I never had any interest in anything spiritual or religious or anything growing up. Like I was quite, free of all of that, and and I never had a desire to go off and learn spirituality or anything like that. I always had a desire to understand humans and human behaviour, though, because at the time I was doing a psychology course, a child psychology course on correspondence, just a little one. And it was, I was probably about 2021. And while I was doing that course, and my understanding of human behaviour and everything, I started to have these experiences come into play that were unusual, and what I mean by that is how I described it to, friends and family, and that was, I felt like my brain was working differently than it had been, and that's all it was for me in the beginning. And what I mean by that, in hindsight now, upon reflection of that, I would word it differently. I would say I began to experience myself in a new way, but back then at the time, it was like my brain's working differently than it was, and so I was always have been quite focused on what took it from thinking that way to thinking this way, and how is it working now, and so those were my primary questions to start with all of this, just kind of understanding what was happening with myself, um, and why my brain was working differently. So I want to put that into context. What I mean by that is, how you walk past somebody, if they've had a bad day, like you kind of have that feeling like, no one talk to you and that, So, and that's normal. We all have that, and but what started happening is I'd come across somebody and I'd be like, oh, she's having a bad day. And then I would have, yeah, but that's just because she's lost her job recently. And, like all of this dialogue would follow that acknowledgement of that feeling, And you think you're thinking about other people and that, but you're not really. When this stuff starts happening, then you're really thinking about other people. And so it was kind of odd. So for me at the time, I was kind of like, oh, it's just these thoughts of falling in from the sky or something, I don't know. So I'm still not thinking anything spiritually. I'm feeling like my brain all of a sudden it went from, and how I described it back then is I went from thinking to thinking about my thinking, and I think we kind of do that sometimes anyway, but I was really in that, where I became the observer to myself, and so, and found myself thinking about my thinking a lot. But what turned me inward and made me think about my thinking is because my thinking had gone through a shift. Like my brain was working differently, and so I had no beliefs to wrap around that. All I knew about spirituality, because we're going back over 30 years, and all I knew about spirituality back then was on Dad's old Western movies with the gypsies and their crystal balls and things, like it certainly was not mainstream like it is today, and so I didn't really have any spiritual context around that to start with, and I wondered if it was a brain tumour to start with, but then I kind of felt really healthy. And then I knew I wasn't going insane. I felt like I was becoming intelligent, but that sounded insane. And my friends were no help, they were like, oh, Jules getting into that spiritual stuff. I was never getting into any spiritual stuff. I was trying to figure out what had happened to me, or why I now was experiencing myself in a whole new way, but I wouldn't have worded it back then like that. And so anyway, I had a hypnotherapist friend back then that was doing some hypnotherapy and that, and he said to me, I think you're having some clairvoyant episodes. And I was like, clairvoyant episodes, Because, I mean, even with my brain working differently, it's like I walk past a Chinese person or something and I would have a word in the Chinese language land in my thoughts, you know? Um, or I would have words come into my mind I didn't understand the meaning of, or I had to look it up in a dictionary and that. And so anything I share here with you and anything I've ever shared with anyone has been really based from what I've come to learn and know through the unfolding of my own experiences, and which is really good because I can kind of wrap those experiences around the knowledge and put them into context from doing that. Anyway, so I had to kind of trust a lot in the beginning. Well, in the beginning, I was really judgy, actually. I was kind of like clairvoyant. What have I got to go out and get some hooped earrings and a muslin dress now? Like, is that my life path? Like, I was the judgiest about it all, you know, because it had all that stigma attached to it and everything, you know. And I never had an interest in it. I didn't even know about any of that. I hadn't even seen a deck of tarot cards or a crystal or any of that. And even to this day, I'm still not about all of that. I think it's beautiful, though, you know, like spiritualism. And I think there's, I actually have a real deep appreciation and quite an admiration for all systems, whether they're religious or cultural or whatever. They're intelligent by design, and they're definitely all interesting. So I've got definitely a different appreciation on everything these days compared to in the beginning. And so I went and got a muslin dress and some hooped earrings, and I don't know, it just didn't seem to fit. And then I tried to want to be taken seriously, you know, in the beginning. And so I think I didn't want to be called a psychic in that, you know. And it's like, so in the beginning, I think I called myself an intuitive counsellor, and, you know, then I stepped it up a bit and went to a psychic psychologist, and, you know, yeah, and just ended up with clairvoyant and that, you know, which actually in the dictionary just means to see clearly. And so, yeah, so in the beginning it was quite difficult and everything for me. And in the beginning, I didn't know how this was happening. That was the thing, you know. And I felt so vulnerable when I didn't know the how. You know, it's like I would sit in those first consultations that I was in with people and just have to hope that information turned up or landed in my head, or almost like a blind faith almost, you know. But it always did, and it was always there, and there was always information to convey, and that always happened. But because I didn't know how I was doing it, or even where the information was coming from, it didn't ever in the beginning feel like, or it never was in the beginning, felt like it was coming from an entity or a spirit being. Or I think in the beginning I said to my friends, the best way I could describe it if I was going to put it into any spiritual kind of context would be maybe a higher self or something, you know. I wasn't quite sure. And so I felt really vulnerable in the beginning because I didn't know I don't know the how. I didn't feel like I was in control of it at all. I felt like I always feared sitting in front of someone and just having nothing or being blank, or, you know, I wouldn't have known what to do with that. But that never happened. It always was there, you know. But it definitely motivated me to figure it all out, you know, and figure out how I was doing this so I could feel in the driver's seat and not feel so vulnerable, and all of that to start with, and also be able to explain it to others, to my friends and people, you know, where I was getting the information from, but to understand it myself most importantly. And one of the first things that I learned about from that desire to figure all of this out and to know the how and the why was the law of karma, that fundamental principle that changed everything for me. Everything. And it has been the cornerstone of all of my workshops and everything that I teach, you know, is to impart the knowledge of that fundamental principle of the law of karma. And I kind of describe it in a little bit of a different way and understand it in a little bit of a different way than a lot of people out there. Like, I haven't actually been able to find anything on the internet or anywhere that explains it in quite the same way, but yeah, I'll share it with you, because it made a huge difference in me, in the experience I was having, the spiritual experience I was having in that. So let's look at the law of karma, right? So what karma means in the dictionary, because the dictionary was always my go-to for these words that were coming into my mind that I couldn't understand. The dictionary was like my Bible in the beginning of this. I think I ended up with quite a few dictionaries. I've still got my original one, but I had my head in the dictionary every day back then. And so in the dictionary, the law of karma, what that means is cause and effect in its most basic kind of description, you know. And so the cause and effect thing. And then what I channeled about it was the questions that you have determine the experiences that you have, and from those experiences come your answers, you know? And that made quite a difference to me, because what it made me realise is, you know, when I walk past that person, they have a bad day, or, oh, not good, and then I had all that information. Well, there must have been a step before that when I went, oh, I wonder why they're not feeling that good, or an inquiry, you know, like a desire to know, I suppose, but not real consciously or anything, but it must have flicked up, because then I would have that following information. Well, that's just because she's, you know, lost her job recently and did it, you know. And so I kind of looked into karma a little bit, and I was like, okay, so we have this belief on it being what goes around comes around, and, you know, you put good out there, then good's going to come back, and you put bad out there, then bad's going to come back, you know. That's kind of the status quo about it all. And I remember being in a video shop one day, and I had a surprise party planned for my best mate, Jodie, you know, and I ran into her at the video store, and she says to me, what are you doing on Saturday? Now, in that moment, I could have lied to her and said to her, you know, nothing. And then I've like lied, so does that mean I'm going to leave the, you know, walk out of the shop and stub my toe, or get punished for lying? Or, you know, because in that case it's like, maybe I should ruin her surprise party then. Or are some lies okay, you know? And who and what out there's dishing out punishment willy-nilly anyway? You know, these were all the things that I wanted to know at the time. And so then I thought, well, maybe we create our own karma, maybe punish ourselves because we're judging things a certain way. It's like I went through a whole lot with that whole topic off the get-go, you know, and I'm so glad I did, because it really changed everything for me in this, you know. So let me describe karma. Okay. All right. If we look at, and I like starting here too, because it kind of clears up all the, you know, or brings about a clarity of understanding on all the fear and negativity in life and all the bad stuff in life. You know, why is all that there? And all the fear in life is about, fear just means a lack of understanding, you know? And anything we don't understand, we usually fear. We usually fear the unknown. We're here to make known the unknown, you know? And I mean, we could have an experience years ago in our life and everything, and it's like where we just wanted to die. It was like life was really bad. We didn't think we were going to be all right. We were defeated, you know? And it's like a really negative experience. And then up here later on in your life, 10 years later, you're like, oh, I'm actually glad that that happened now. Oh, yeah, no, it's like, because you can see the role that it's played in your journey, see what you learned from it, you see why you went through it, you have all that awareness of it. So now up here 10 years later, oh no, that's a positive thing that happened back there now. Yeah, no, I'm glad that that happened now. So it made me realise that energy isn't so much like in the positive and negative that we put it in, you know. Our perception on what we're understanding at the time is what takes an experience from something negative to something positive, you know. And so all the negative things in life boil down to one thing, and it's fear, and fear's a lack of understanding. And so, like anger, that's fear of being wrong, so a lack of understanding on being wrong. Guilt is a fear of having done wrong, so a lack of understanding on having done wrong. You get the drift of this and where this is heading. So stress is a fear of not having enough time. Paranoia is a fear of being trapped, and so all of the ways in which we negatively experience ourselves, and that is all coming out of a fear and a lack of understanding, and that's due to karma, right? Cause and effect. And so what karma did is karma made the difference between us having a creation and a creation with an evolution, because I've talked to Grandma and Spirit and everyone else over there, and it's like they know where it's all at, like Grandma still has regrets, things she's sorry for, they are still in the evolutionary process themselves, and it's that very, lack of understanding and regrets or desires to have done things that didn't get done. That's what fuels and gives life to the next incarnation that we have, It's like tidying up old business from prior lifetimes a lot of the time. And so that desire to know and those things not yet experienced and all of that is what fuels the next incarnation that we come into, And even in the day that you're in today, it's like everything you're inquiring, everything gives you a tomorrow. So the questions that we have determine the experiences that we have, and from those experiences come our answers. And that's all that's ever going on in reality. We're taking things from point A to point B. And so let's look at our current understanding on karma, where it's like, what goes around comes around and everything, So say I'm this woman, and say you're this married couple, and I come along and start having an affair with your husband and everything, and hussy I am, and then 10 years later in life, and that like I get a husband, and he starts cheating and screwing around on me and everything, and we would say, well, that's karma for you. What goes around comes around, And then there's this other example where we talk about breaking the cycle, It's like, say little Johnny, say he's got an alcoholic, abusive father, And it's like, oh, we've got to break that cycle. We've got to, make sure Johnny doesn't end up like that, And then along the way, Johnny does end up like that. And he ends up being an alcoholic and being abusive and all of those things and everything, and that's the cycle that we talk about. And so why does that happen, And so when I'm back here, so that the reason that, when I ended up with the husband 10 years later in this first example, and he was cheating on me, and that's not because some big external force out there decided I need to be punished for an earlier crime of sin or whatever, It's not because something big and bad out there was dishing out punishment willy-nilly or any of that, It was because back here, when I was having the affair and everything, I was wondering why they were having problems in their marriage, wondering how she was feeling, wondering if he was going to leave her, wondering why he's, not happy in his marriage, all those questions, And then up ahead in my life, I experience a reality with a husband being in an affair and all of that happening to live those answers to my previously asked questions, So everything you're going through today in your life is due to something that you've been questioning. We do this in a little way. We wonder about that new book to read. We start seeing it in stores. We start, hearing other people talking about it. It's flicking up in our reality everywhere. We wonder about John, and then we run into someone in the supermarket and they're like, oh, I saw John the other day. And it's like, oh my gosh, I was just wondering about him. We call that a coincidence, And so these are the way in which we are creating reality through this cause and effect. you know, and through that karmic cycle, and we're all here, and it's karma that enables us to have a tomorrow, have an evolutionary process, have this physical reality that we're all living and moving through, and that, you know. We're all here to make known the unknown, and actually the only thing that's getting evolved at all is knowledge, you know. When you look at it, it's like I know more today than I knew yesterday, and I'm going to know more tomorrow than I know today, so that's definitely getting evolved, you know. Making known the unknown, because when we come to discover and realise all the things that we have seek to know and understand and discover about ourselves, well, then we're not standing in a lack of understanding anymore, you know. We're not subjected to all of those emotional responses and reactions and misinterpretations of what's happening in our world and that, you know. And starting to experience ourselves in a whole new way once that happens, you know. So yeah, the experiences that you've got going on at the moment are due to what you've been questioning and that, you know. And yeah, well, sand coming through at the moment. And so fear's just a lack of understanding. And, you know, like I have people turn up in consultations with me, and they have a consult, and then they leave and that, and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better now. Like, everything makes so much more sense, and I can't wait to start that thing I was going to do. And, you know, they're inspired, they're feeling better. Now, I didn't go out there and busybody myself around in their physical lives and change it up at all, you know. The only thing I've done is brought forth information that has enabled their world to make more sense to them, enabled, you know, it's also been able to confirm things that they've thought and felt and that have been happening, and equip them with more information and more awareness over their circumstances, you know. And that's what made the difference from when they turn up feeling defeated and hopeless or loss of hope, and, you know, and that complete shift in the session that goes on. The awareness has done that for them, you know. Me being able to offer up information where now they are more greatly aware of why they've created the experiences they have, why they're moving through them, what things mean, what, you know, like all of that. And now they have clarity, and now they're like skipping off on their way. And so you don't have to busybody around change anything in your life or anything. It's like if you're really challenged in things that you're in and everything, then look deeper into why you're moving through this experience and why it's happening to you and what you've been questioning, and, you know, and that's how we give birth to the experiences to get our answers from, and we always get our answers, you know. And so with the second example, you know, little Johnny, right? Okay. Now, that didn't happen to Johnny. He didn't grow up and become an alcoholic, abusive man because there's some fixed cycle and that has to happen, you know, that way. The reason now Johnny's got a little brother, his name's Matthew, right? Matthew didn't grow up and become an alcoholic or violent. He grew up and became a priest, actually, you know? And so why didn't that happen to that brother? You know, how comes it doesn't happen to some of them? You know? So this is why. So when Johnny's little, he, you know, he sat there and he went, I wonder why Dad drinks. I wonder why he hurts Mum. I wonder why he's so angry all the time, you know? And then he grows up and becomes angry and hurts people he loves, and has a problem with drinking, and he's experiencing the truth to those previously asked questions. And that's the only way we ever come to a truth, is through the experience for ourselves, you know. And I mean, that's what I learned with all of this awareness, you know. No matter how psychic I am and everything, people are still going to be a little bit skeptical and everything because they don't know the how, you know. And so I gave something a whirl 25 years ago. I was like, well, if I can channel from somebody what they've been up to recently, and, what's happening in their lives and that, then I must be able to channel from them how to show them how to do this. This was never something I thought was in me and not in others. I felt like it was something that had been experienced and then realised, or vice versa, or the way in which it entered my life I'm really quite blessed with, because I didn't have any beliefs that were going to create any limitations for me, And so anyway, the reason that happened to Johnny is because he sat there and he went, I wonder why. Yeah, we covered that. So the reason that didn't happen to Matthew is because he was he was a different sort of character, different sort of kid, and he was kind of quite self-absorbed and wasn't too concerned with what Dad was doing and that. Like, he was just in his own little world a lot, so he was wondering things like, how did life begin, and all of those sorts of questions that led him into the priesthood and experiencing and having the necessary experiences he had in there to discover the answers to his previously asked questions, And so when we learn about how things operate in the physical, they're actually operating quite similarly, or they are the same actually, in the non-physical, intangible nature of our experiences, It's a good way of figuring them out because they're one and the same. And so what I came to discover was that, even when I sat with people in readings and I thought, oh God, I hope some information's coming in and that, there was still this background thought of, okay, what do I get about this person? What about them? So there's that question, And as soon as I have that thought, then whatever follows is to be conveyed and will be able to confirm some things that people's been going. I mean, I don't even really know what I'm talking about when I'm talking to other people, but they know, This is about them. And so it made me feel like I was in the driver's seat and actually knew how to operate this to a certain degree, or how it was working, and I always had that kind of sense of being able to apply a question if I felt stuck ever, but I never felt stuck, but just all these fears and worries that you go through and you have in that, And so, and then I, so more personalised in my experiences, right? Like I definitely was very grounded in the fact that thoughts create, and I created my own reality and everything. And I mean, years ago, that book came out on that movie called The Secret, and I thought that was so cool because it was a good start for people to start looking at their thoughts and whether they're impacting reality, and start looking inward at that thinking process a little bit, But then a lot of people weren't getting what was on their vision board, and, and finding it a little bit more difficult than they first thought it would be. And, because it's really the knowledge that we're evolving and everything, and that's given birth to through the inquiry, through the questioning, That's where the real learning's going on and the real experiences are coming from. And so I had a car accident years ago, and fractured my sternum and everything, and it was quite bad, and I had to, there had to be an ambulance, and I had to be carried out of a wreck, and I had to, be carried through a paddock and put in a helicopter, and it was very dramatic. And then I was in hospital, and I think it was like a day or two later, the police came up and saw me in hospital, and he's like, that guy was on the wrong side of the road coming around the corner and that and hit you, and so, are you wanting to press charges and do all that? And I says to this police officer, no, not really, because actually I create everything that happens to me in my reality. I can't just sit here and believe that and then go, I didn't create that bad stuff, And I think even when that Secret and that came out, all that book and everything, it was like people were then in this notion that they could manage their thinking or manage their thoughts, or which actually you can be aware of them, but they're just happening. And so I said to the police officer, so I created that car to come around the corner on the wrong side of the road and run into me. And so he looked at me like I was a bit of a freak loop. Until I told him he'd got a new dog and his wife was 7 months pregnant and they were looking at buying their first home. Well, then he shut the curtains at the hospital and wanted a reading then, But I said to him, the reason that I've created this is because I've been questioning the health system recently, because I'm looking at my self-awareness programs and where I kind of can see them being of benefit, especially with people that are in service to others and everything, So I had been kind of contemplating the government systems and things with facilitating workshops and training programs. And so because I've been questioning the health system, it's like now I was being processed through it, And that gave me more clarity and more understanding, more truths about where it was falling short and what it needed and how it operated and what I needed to know about all of that, because I was in hospital for a few weeks. And so, I think when we were looking at positive thinking and thoughts create and affirmations and manager thinking and all of that, we're trying to manage our thinking in a way, like back then I remember, I took it to the first level at the start where I was like, did that happen because I didn't want my car anymore? So now I've caused a wreck, Did it happen because I feared having an accident, In which case, careful what you wish for, careful what you think, all of that dialogue, like we're in charge of that in some way, but no. And so I did kind of flick into that layer to start with, and then I went, oh, hang on a minute. Hang on. What have I been questioning? And it will always come back to what you've been questioning, You wonder where you're going to get some tyres from for your car and that, and then someone's like, oh, this guy's got this deal on some tyres. Like, oh, yeah, all those coincidences, all those things. It's how we're creating reality at every level, And so, with whatever you're going through at the moment and everything and experiences that you're having, look at what you've been wondering about and what you've been questioning, and your world will make a lot more sense just on that, and you'll always get your answers. Always get your answers. You'll never not get your answers. That's what I do know. And I'm going to share the experience that told me that. Right. When all this began, I had an experience where I had a real clear, what felt like a memory or a visualization of being in my mother's womb, before I came here. And I remember there was this point at being in the womb where I didn't want to come to life or wouldn't come to life, or and back then, when I'm in the understandings that I'm in, it's like I thought, well, I must have looked at this life and gone, screw that, I'm out, whatever the case may be, but it's like, I just remember being in the womb and there being this possibility of having to go home, return home. And so I went home to my mum and I said to her, did you nearly lose me in a miscarriage and that, Because you'd think that's where you're going to get that answer from, You think it's the only place you get that answer from. And she goes, oh, what makes you say that? And I go, I just have this real vivid memory of being in the womb and wanting to go home. Like I'm trying to understand the spiritual information that I'm getting and understanding my journey and myself, and and I just remember being in the womb wanting to go home. And Mum goes, oh, well, if that was the case, then I don't know anything about it. And I go, the thing is, I feel like you must have known about it, like it's that big, that I don't know how you couldn't know that. And it felt like to me that there was more to that, you know. In the beginning of my awareness, I went, I tell you what, turned you back to the family. It's like I had so many things I wanted answers to in that. And I mean, no one out there was altogether that helpful either in the beginning. I think some people were worried about what I might find out about them, or I don't know, especially the people that were close in my life. And it's like, I don't want to find out anything about anyone. I want to know why my brain's working this way and why I'm having these memories and why I'm visualizing these things and why this is happening and that's happening. And, you know, and 3 weeks later, I kid you not, I get this big envelope in the mail. And it's this big letter from Auckland University, and they were doing a follow-up research study from all the babies that were on a new drug trial in 1971 with mothers that were at risk of miscarriage. And now it was like 30 years later, and they were doing a follow-up on those babies that were like non-placebo, you know, that were on that real drug. And it was the biggest drug trial in the world was done here in New Zealand, and those drugs are still used today to prevent mothers from having miscarriages and things. And so I got quite excited when I got this in the mail, because I was like, has anybody happened to anyone's brains from that drug trial and that? Because I'm, you know, like, because they wanted to send a nurse down and they wanted to go through and run all these tests and that, diabetes and stuff like that, you know, and ask me questions about my life and everything like that. And I said to her, do you want to know anything about the brain and that? Like, is anything, like, my brain works quite differently, and so this might be why, because I'm trying to figure out why this has happened to me as well. And she said to me, no, you have to live in the Auckland area and that for us to go into those more detailed tests and examinations and things, you know. And I'm going to tell you what, I nearly contemplated moving to Auckland, or putting my address there anyway. But I was so upset with my mother back then at that time with that, you know, because I'm just trying to figure out why I'm having the experiences that I'm having and wanting clarity on that, you know. And so my ego trotted on off with my little envelope to my mum's house, and I walked in the door and I was like, you were at risk of miscarriage from losing me. And she goes, was I? No, I don't think I. And I go, yeah, no, you actually were. And she's like, are you still going on about that? And I'm like, well, I actually got this letter from the follow-up research study and that, where they want to come and see me and send a nurse out to see me and that, because of all the mothers that were on a new drug trial and that, you know, and that were at risk of miscarriage back then. And she goes, oh, yes, but I never really thought I was going to lose you though. And I go, you were in hospital on a new drug trial to try and prevent miscarriage with me. You didn't think to mention that when I asked you about it, you know, like, the frustration in the beginning I had. But aside from all that, what it did teach me at that time, because I was learning a lot on the law of karma and cause and effect and how we create the experiences, and, you know, and that the questions that we have determine those experiences, and from those come our answers. All of that I was looking into at the time. And what that experience taught me is, oh no, you'll always get your answers, you know. If you don't get it from where you're thinking you're going to get it from, you're still going to get your answers, you know. And so that was a huge turning point for me, and I think it's a good place for everyone to start at if they want to feel in the driver's seat of their lives, and, you know, and really explore the possibility that they are the creator of their experiences, and take some ownership to that, and which is easy to do when you start looking at it from this perspective and you get examples of it in your own life, you know, and become more more consciously focused on how your experiences are connected to what you're seeking to know and do and find out and all of that, and that's another thing that I learned with my awareness and everything too, is like I used to say, why have I got these things happening to me? But it's like, that's a contradiction in itself, because if I'm the creator of my own reality, then these things have to be happening for me, which was a hard pill to swallow in the beginning when I'm, in hospital with big black eyes and stuck there and can't get my daughter to school, and I've got no vehicle now, and I never had any family support either. I kind of didn't really have that around. And yeah, so it's kind of like I'm still going through that layer that we all go through without the awareness, where it's like I'm still beaten up and broken and, got these problems to solve now and this crisis happening and got to figure a lot of things out and everything. There's still that, But now there's this other layer that's in the experiences with me all the time as well, where I've definitely got an awareness of how I've created that, why I've created it, what I'm learning about from it, and why I'm moving through that, And the reason that we're moving through anything, going through anything, is to attain the goals and the vision for our life we've seeked and the knowledge we want to know, to move us forward in those ways. And so that's kind of quite a biggie, is understanding that law of karma, and knowing that that's how life unfolds. So there is nothing to fear but fear itself. Fear is just a lack of understanding. I'll leave this video for here now, otherwise I'm just kind of going around circles with things, but I don't know, it's the beginning of this. It's giving you some food for thought, and I don't know, go and check out things from this perspective in your experiences in everyday life. And yeah.